me to be a fact checker, but on that Janesville GM plant, isn't it true that that GM plant closed during the Bush administration? Is your criticism that the auto bailout wasn't big enough to come back and reopen it? That was not Barack Obama shutting down that plant.
No, it actually it had 2 rounds of layoffs and ultimately closed down just a few years ago. But it's a good example of what happens here. And the irony is, for all the people who said that the bailout was suddenly good in places like Janesville or Kenosha, it wasn't. In the end, what they ultimately ended up doing in that bailout was doing a bankruptcy that was a managed bankruptcy, which is essentially what Mitt Romney called for in the first place. We would have been a lot better off, and we would have saved the taxpayers a lot more money had they done that early on, and it might have just saved plants like GM if they'd been more effective in the private sector doing that early on.
So you think that the auto bailout was not effective for Wisconsin and Ohio, for other neighboring states there?
It wasn't in Wisconsin. If you ask the guys that used to work at GM in Janesville, if you look at the guys that worked at Chrysler in Kenosha, they don't feel like it was effective because they're not working today. What we need is true prosperity, and yet it comes really more effectively for the private sector, and that's what Paul talked about tonight. He didn't just talk about the budget. He talked about freedom and prosperity. Those are the things I think independent voters, as well as the base, cares about in the state of Wisconsin.
I hear you on the general issues. It is surprising to hear you run down the American auto industry at a moment that it really has come back, and to see such a bright spot in the economy being talked about as if things haven't worked out in the auto industry since the bailout is a surprise, Gov.
I'm just pointing out it didn't in Wisconsin and ultimately did in places like Michigan and elsewhere, but it could have come back more effectively and sooner had they taken the advice of Mitt Romney early on and done a managed bankruptcy instead of spending all those dollars of taxpayers' money that otherwise could have been done more effectively in the private sector early on. We wasted a lot of money. We've done that in many other areas in the federal government. It's yet one or more of the many indictments against this president and his administration, and why we need to move forward.